Hello everybody, we're back. This is the third session of technology and human rights advocacy, and as you already submitted your assignments for this week, we are going to look at the topic for this week, which is strategy, campaigns and tactics, and then we're going to focus on the assignments that were given to you, which are going to be connected to the assignments of this week. So unlike the previous session when we looked at the assignments first, now we're going to go straight into the topic for this week, which is strategy, campaigns and tactics. The reason why we want to focus on this is because although we talked about citizen journalism and the way ordinary people can actually disseminate information about human rights issues, we will look at the more strategic approach to this, and throughout the course we're going to focus on this strategic approach to human rights advocacy. So in order to do that, we're going to look at all three levels of strategic planning, the level of strategy, the level of campaigns and the level of tactics. And so this particular session will be focused on strategy, campaigns and tactics. So let me go straight into the question, what is strategy? So if anybody has an idea, if anybody has some thoughts about what strategy could be, it can be, you can raise your hand and we can collect some thoughts now. Or if you prefer, if you have some let's say shorter thoughts on what strategy is, I will also take the inputs from the chat box. But I would also like to invite somebody to say something if possible.
Thank you. I think a strategy is defining your goal and finding the best way to reach your goal. And along this best way you choose, you have to know under what circumstances are you going to reach your goal, during what time, and what kind of tools are you going to use to reach your goal. So it can be like a kind of planning step by step in order to reach your specific goal.
Thank you. Any other thoughts? Somebody else? Okay, so far what we hear and what I can read here, strategy is a plan of action designed to gain a goal. And from what you just said, we can actually see that the strategy is connected to planning, and the strategy is connected to the analysis of the situation, to the circumstances, as you said, and the strategy is connected to a goal. So we're gonna look more at the role of the goals and the role of planning in strategy, especially in political strategy. But I would like to spend a few words just talking about the origin of the term and how we ended up talking about strategy. If we look at this particular slide, we can see Sun Tzu, the famous ancient Chinese general who wrote the book titled The Art of War. And he is considered to be the father of strategic thinking and the father of strategy, especially the military strategy, because he himself was a military commander. But the thoughts of Sun Tzu are often, especially today, used by corporations, by political organizations, by other entities, and his strategic insight is used not just in military but in other forms of human organization, especially in business and politics. So the thing that made this guy, Sun Tzu, very famous was that he actually focused on the foresight and planning beforehand, before the battle takes place. And he even said that planning and foresight can actually win a battle, not courage and arms and that sort of stuff. So the emphasis on strategy actually is to allow an organization to overcome circumstances beforehand through careful planning. So this book has been, translated to all the possible languages, and it was published so many times in history in the last few thousand years as it exists, and it became, let's say, the source of wisdom when it comes to strategy and strategic thinking. But to go more into the details, there are three levels of strategy, because strategy itself is determined by several levels of organization, several levels of planning, and several levels of implementation. We have this is a common distinction that is made in the military, it is made in politics, and it is made in business. So sometimes these words or names differ, but usually they are as follows. First, we have the top level of strategic planning, which is the strategy. Then under the strategic level, the next level is the level of campaigns or operations, as they are also called. And then on the bottom, there is the level of tactics. So does anybody have an idea what is the difference between these levels? Why do we have these different levels of strategy? Why isn't it all just one strategy? Or, why isn't it just a tactical level? Why do we have to distinguish between strategic level and tactical level of planning? Any thoughts? Oh, you can also raise your hand if you wish, and then you can actually... And in the meantime, I can read the first comment here. That the strategy is the big picture, and tactics and operations are detailed activities. Then another thought is that they are not different, but they complement each other, which is an important point. Thanks for making it. And then strategy is a theory, but campaign is its execution or its operation. So this is another thought that we get from you. And let's have one or two more, if possible. Okay, I think this is going to be enough. So yeah, indeed, here we have another one. Tactics are the ways to reach the strategy. Indeed, you can actually, from what you just say and from what this picture shows, is that actually this is all part of the same plan, and that somehow tactics contribute to larger campaigns and operations, and they on their own contribute to larger strategy. So this is all part of the same plan. However, there is a distinction between strategic level, operational level, and tactical level, and we're going to go into that distinction just so that we understand the difference. So let's go to the next slide, where we are going to talk about the first level, which is the strategic level. So I'm going to define it, and I'm going to use an example from my experience, as an organizer and activist in the Otpor movement. Later, we're gonna look at some other examples too. But let me start with the explanation. What is strategy? Strategy, it comes from the Greek word strategos, which means general, commander, leader of the army. And so strategy is about the commandeering, about the top leadership, about the grand plan. So this is the top of on the pyramid of strategic planning. So that's why this word comes from the Greek word describing a commander, a general. And strategy is a plan of action or policy designed to achieve a major goal. So this is something big. We're talking about the plan to achieve a major goal. So there are also different examples of strategies, but I'm going to focus now on the example that I participated in, and this is Otpor's strategy against Milosevic. So in the readings for this week, you have my article on the successful tactics for nonviolent change in Serbia, which was published in Gozar magazine some 3, 4, maybe 5 years ago. But they describe the development and the different levels of the strategy of the Serbian opposition, where Otpor was part of, and actually probably the most important part of that opposition. So you can read that into more details, but what I'm going to now just summarize that Otpor's strategy against Milosevic was the strategy to defeat Milosevic in the elections. So this was the goal of Otpor's activities, to defeat Milosevic in the elections by having one candidate against Milosevic, running against Milosevic, and then to counter the possible fraud and falsification of ballots by organizing a campaign of civil disobedience, a general strike, and thus forcing Milosevic to accept the defeat. So on the strategic level, we have the goal. Goal is to remove Milosevic. We have the method how we're going to do it. So using elections and using civil disobedience to prevent the electoral fraud. And we have let's say the basic explanation on who is going to do it, what kind of organizing does it take. So this is not just a strategy for a political party, it requires a broad-based movement that is going to organize this campaign of civil disobedience. So on this strategic level, you can see that these questions are answered. So the example of strategy, you can read more in the article that is posted there. You can actually get more details, but this is in a nutshell what was our strategy all about. There is also a very good case study on Tavana's library about Otpor and the defeat of Milosevic, which practically describes the same effort. Now we're going to the campaign level. So in order to achieve this strategy that I described, we as Otpor organized, developed and implemented several campaigns. So what is a campaign? Campaign comes from a Latin campus, which means an open field. And this is based on, it's also another military term, like the previous one, the term on strategy, which is actually derived from the Greek word describing generals and leaders. This one is derived from the Latin word for a field. because in the spring, in the old days, armies would go out into the field after spending winter in the barracks. They would go out in the field, and then they would organize a campaign for that, a military campaign for that year. And then as the winter comes, they go back to the barracks and wait for the spring to continue the war. So a campaign, as you can see, was a major phase in the larger strategy. So the similar thing is with the politics and with business today, because both politics and business use the same word. So you have a campaigns of big companies who are trying to sell their products, and you also have political campaigns by politicians who are organizing, especially election campaigns, and we have one happening in the U.S. It's gonna end very soon. So the campaign is a major phase in a larger strategy, and to use a definition that I put on the slide, campaign is a more limited plan of action, which is aimed at achieving a specific objective as part of a wider strategy. So this is part of a strategic plan, but it just focuses on one element of strategy, achieving one objective necessary to fulfill or to reach the overall goal of the strategy. So the example that I'm going to use for this is the Gotovje, or He is Finished campaign. This is a campaign that we as Otpor developed and implemented during the election campaign for the President of Serbia in 2000. And the goal of this campaign was to motivate people to vote against Milosevic by giving them enough hope that he can be defeated in the elections and that he will not be allowed to falsify elections after it. Because the main problem that we faced in the implementation of the big strategy, defeating Milosevic in the elections, was that people, although they didn't vote for Milosevic usually, they didn't believe that he could be changed through the elections, because before that he never accepted the will of the people, or he actually falsified all the previous elections. So the goal or the objective of this campaign was to mobilize people to vote against Milosevic and to prepare them for the civil disobedience once he falsifies the elections. So you can see this is a much more how shall I say, specific objective. It is not as big as the grand strategy, but it is more detailed in a sense that we have a campaign that is going to start at a particular day, it's going to end on a particular day. This one was supposed to end on the election day, on the 24th of September 2000, and it has a very clear message and everything. So we're going to go into detail later. But this is just for you to see the difference between strategic level and campaign level. And then finally, a tactic. Tactic is the lowest level of strategy, and as somebody said earlier, tactics are ways to reach the strategy. Tactics are, how shall I say, detailed activities, as somebody said earlier. Tactic comes from a Greek word taktika, which describes, or actually means, the arrangement of forces. So it is interesting that the word itself means arrangement, not later engagement of the forces, because these generals that were talking about tactics, they were not really in control of what these forces in the field would be doing. The generals were sitting on top of the hill overlooking the battlefield. So it was up to the lieutenants and sergeants and these, let's say, low-level petty officers to do that. So it is interesting the generals were only concerned about the arrangement of forces, but not about what is going on later. And the similar thing is with movements and with the human rights advocacy groups, because they are not always in control of every tactical decision that is being made by the people who are part of the campaign. So they can actually maybe arrange them, but they cannot always influence what the tactical choice is going to be and how the tactics are going to be implemented. And this is an important thing to remember, and we're going to focus on that 2 weeks from now when we talk about the organization in more detail. But let's define the tactic. Tactic is a specific action, a specific task within a wider operation or a wider campaign. So this is something that we can point to as a single event or as a single move by a political force, by a movement, by an advocacy group, whatever. So it is in that sense discrete. Unlike an operation, a campaign, or a strategy which is ongoing, which lasts for a long time, tactic is limited to a very short period of time, and it is very specific action, very specific task. So the example that I'm going to use, and the one that you can read more about when you read about the Serbian case study, is the tactic of roadblocks and barricades that happened after the elections in Serbia when Milosevic tried to falsify ballots. So this was part of a wider campaign to prevent electoral fraud and to actually respond to electoral fraud by civil disobedience. And the goal of this tactic was actually to mobilize people for a general strike. So blockades on roads where people commute and where people have to drive their cars and take the buses and the public transportation in general, they could encounter these roadblocks and they could actually learn about what was going on. So in order to mobilize people for the general strike, roadblocks around Serbia were a necessary tactic. So you can see how they fit into the bigger campaign, and that bigger campaign then fits into the larger strategy. So this is another example of a tactic. So when we talk about strategy and tactics, we will often move from a strategic level to a tactical level and go back to the strategic level and analyze all these levels interchangeably. So as Sun Tzu said, and we're going to quote him again and probably a few more times before this course ends, strategy without tactics is the slowest route to victory, and tactics without strategy is the noise before defeat. So what some of you mentioned earlier, that strategy and tactics are part of the same plan and they complement each other, this is what Sun Tzu also said, that there is no strategy without tactics, and there can be no and the tactics cannot work without the bigger strategy. So what I would like to offer here is another thought, which is that campaigns serve as links between the strategy and the tactics, because strategy is sometimes so big and so long term and so impossible to how shall I say analyze, because it takes years and it requires such a huge effort. And tactics are sometimes so specific and sometimes so contemporary, so tied to the current situation, that often it is very difficult to make a link between the strategy and the tactics. And so this is where campaigns fit in, because campaigns will help you put the strategy into different phases and move you slowly from one phase to another using appropriate tactics so that you can actually slowly reach the long-term goal. So this is why in the next couple of in the next 2 or 3 classes during this course, we're going to focus on the campaign level, because it is, I believe, a very important level for a human rights advocacy effort. So let's look at the level of planning. This is now the how shall I say, the overview of what has been said so far. And so I'm going to offer a few comparisons between strategic level, campaign level, and tactical level. And I would ask you to offer some more thoughts if you have on this. But let me start with comparing these 3 levels of planning. In terms of detail, we can say that a strategic plan, as the biggest and the top plan of all the 3 levels of strategy, the strategic plan has the lowest level of detail. It is not so detailed as the campaign plan. And the campaign plan itself is not as detailed as a tactical plan. Why? Because in the strategic plan, you need to answer questions that are related to a very long and uncertain period of time. So there is not much information about that to allow you to give a necessary level of detail. There are too many uncertainties. So you need to establish the most important borderlines and most important guidelines for the strategic plan, but you cannot go that much into detail. When we talk about the operational level, we can offer more detail. When we talk about tactical level, as in the example that I used before, for instance, the example of blockades and barricades, you can go into a very, very specific level of detail. You can even plan which intersection the organizers would occupy and set up the barricade. You cannot do that in the strategic plan, because you don't know that you're gonna be needing this tactic at one point in the future. It's just impossible to know that. The same thing is with the when we talk about time. And in regard to time, strategic planning is long-term planning, which means that strategic plans last for years. Often they are so long-term that sometimes people just, they even lose the notion that there is a strategy, because it's so long-term. And when we talk about operational level, campaign level, we're talking about mid-term planning, and these campaigns usually last for months. 1 month, 2 months, 2 months, sometimes 3 months, 6 months, up to a year. But these are operational planning is mid-term in a sense that you can still, when you start planning, you can still see it through for this campaign to end, which is in 3 months, 4 months, or 5 months. And then you can look back and see if what's planned was achieved. So this is another reason why campaign level is important. And when we talk about tactical level, we talk about short-term planning. And this is, few days, a week, maybe 10 days. But you hardly plan more than a month when it comes to a tactic. That is very unusual. Tactics usually takes few days or maybe a few weeks to develop and implement. So we talk about short-term planning when we talk about tactics. And when we talk about scope, strategic plan is always a national plan. If we talk about the national issue, if we talk about the regional issue or local issue, that's different. But if we talk about national issue in a human rights advocacy effort, strategic plan is always a national plan. Operational level, when we talk about campaigns, we can have campaigns that are national, but we can also have campaigns that are regional, that are just focused on one region. So on the campaign level, we can introduce the regional level, which means that some campaigns are going to be used only in certain regions, and some campaigns may be used in or implemented in all regions on a national level. But when we talk about tactical level, we're talking mostly about local. Why local? Because this is where tactics take place. They take place on a specific crossroad, as I use the example of roadblocks. They take place in specific towns, in specific villages, in specific communities. So, although some tactics can happen on a national level, they individually happen in local communities. So we can see that the difference between this level of planning, strategic level, campaign level, or operational level, and tactical level is in terms of detail, term, and scope can be pretty much distinguished. Do you have any other thoughts? What could be the differences between a strategic level of planning, operational level of planning, and tactical level of planning? On some other, any thoughts?
I think that one of the main differences between the level of planning is about the number of people involved in this.
That's fantastic. I'm gonna type that in, and if somebody else if somebody has some other thoughts. Okay, leader for strategy, managers for operational, and people to act for. This is actually a very good insight. A leader is important for strategy, managers are important for operational, and for tactical you need people to act. So yes, we can put it like that. I like to say that you need leadership for strategy. Okay, so you need leaders for strategy, you need managers for campaign, and you need organizers and activists for tactical. You also, managers also go with organizers. You also need organizers for operational level. So this is another important detail. Strategy is on paper and tactics are on the ground. This is also an important insight, that strategy is on paper, and if you are lucky, then tactics are in the papers, meaning in newspapers. But this is another reason why operational level is very important, because this is the campaign level is where you actually link what is written to what is going to be done in the end. Because as Sun Tzu said, strategy without tactics is the slowest route to victory. You know, I would say that strategic plan without tactics is just as you said, is the paper. It's never going to be implemented. So another reason why the operational level is important, because this is going to link the strategy to specific concrete things that are happening on the ground. Okay, any other thoughts? This was a very good, these were very good contributions, and we can also say that when it comes to goals, and similar to the level of detail, the strategic goals are not as specific as the tactical goals, which also influences the evaluation of success. And this is another important element, because you hardly evaluate the success of the strategy based on the goal, because the only way you can do it is by reaching that goal. But you can pretty much evaluate the success of a tactic because of the stated objective. We want to achieve this. Did we achieve it or not? Okay, we have one more. Strategy is responsible for tactical and operational, and it affects the strategy basics. Yes, this is important to not to forget that. I'm going to just go back to the levels of strategy. It is important not to forget that this pyramid has strategy on top. So the strategy is developed first, and then campaigns and operations are developed as a result of strategic planning, and then tactics are developed as a result of campaign planning or operational planning. So strategy is always, how shall I say, primary. It is more important than, or actually it comes first, not more important, but it comes first before campaigns and tactics. Okay, so these were some really good insights. This is very, very, very good. We will, continue this discussion later and see if there are any other differences between these different levels of planning. But we have to now go into the process of development of strategy. And in the first step, usually organizations talk about their vision and about their mission. Meaning that vision, or vision of tomorrow, is an answer to the question, where do we see ourselves in the future? As a community, as a society, as a country, especially in relation to the human rights issue. If we talk about the human rights advocacy group, if we talk about human rights issue that is in question. So the main question about vision is, where do we see ourselves in the future? And the main question about the mission is, what is our purpose, or actually what are we going to do about it? What are we planning to do in general to get us closer to the vision? So what is interesting about these two questions? Do you have any ideas? Is there anything unusual or anything awkward or anything worth discussing about these two questions? Where do we see ourselves in the future, and what is our purpose? Any thoughts? Does anything look strange here? Okay, so somebody thinks that this is not the first step. Can you please raise your hand and explain what would be the first step? Okay, so as I understand from the chat box, the first step would be an aim to start. And well, this is similar to the vision of tomorrow. The vision of tomorrow is the aim. Where do we want to see? What do we want to see happening in the future? But it is much more broader than the aim of an organization. This is what the organization, a human rights group, or an individual is fighting for. This is something that is going to happen in the future as a result of this effort. So, to use an example of Otpor, where I was an organizer, Otpor had an aim to remove Milosevic, but the most important thing for us was the vision of tomorrow, which in our case was a country which could elect and change leaders in a democratic fashion, and a country where politics would be contained in the institutions of parliament, government, etc., and a country that would actually not be a dictatorship. So this was a vision. This had little to do with what Otpor was going to do about it. This was more something like a dream that we had and that we wanted to achieve. And so then, you know, the next question was what was our purpose? What would we do about this? And in our case, the mission, because we were at the time a student organization, the mission was to mobilize students, to organize a youth movement, to do something to attract and organize the youth. We still didn't know what the youth would be organized for, and we still didn't know how we're going to reach our vision of tomorrow. And this is what is interesting about this first step. The first step is usually not a result of any planning or not result of any rational thinking. The first step is deeply connected to one's desires and one's beliefs and one's values. So the first step, vision of tomorrow, how we see the future, where we want the future to be, and where do we see ourselves in achieving that future. This mostly comes from our motivation, personal motivation and the motivation as a group. So this is not actually a matter of decision. This is something that we are forced to do by our inner selves, by our values, by our beliefs, by our character. And in that sense, this is not the strategic part of the process. This is something where we have to open our hearts and open our souls and to say what we really believe in. And this is still not strategy. So the first step in strategic planning is not strategic. This is something that we need to do, something that needs to be done, that we feel that needs to be done. And this is important because this is what gives strength to continue. This is what gives the enthusiasm, and this is what gives creativity later when we come down to the nitty-gritty details of strategic planning. So this is important. The strategic plan is to come closer to the vision that you have and to fulfill the mission that you have. Okay, so here we have an example. Here, somebody giving an example. For instance, a vision would be a society with LGBT acceptance and equal rights, and mission would be making people educated about LGBT, try to remove violence against LGBT in law, etc., etc. So this is a very good example. So this is something that is not a result of strategic planning. This is something that is a result of commitment and motivation that comes from one's values. And so if we go from the first step, and I repeat, the first step is not rational, it's more emotional, and this is actually why this first step is so important. When we go from the first step into the planning process, then we are hit with a more rational and more, how shall I say, focused exercise. And there are, as one of my friends from Otpor used to say, there are three things that are important in planning. And these three things are analysis, analysis, and analysis. Similar thing was said by Sun Tzu, and here we quote him again. Sun Tzu said, "So it is said that if you know your enemies and you know yourself, you could win 100 battles without a single loss." So here is a bold claim. Sun Tzu says that if you do your homework and that if you understand the enemy that you're facing in the battle, because he was talking about war and military strategy, and if you understand your enemy's capabilities, strength, position, morale, everything, and if you know all the same things about yourself, you can win 100 battles without a single loss, meaning that you will pick your battles. If you know that the enemy is stronger than you, you will avoid going into battle. If you know that you are stronger than the enemy, then you are going to go into the battle and win it. So, in other words, what Sun Tzu is saying is that, and what this friend of mine was also saying, is that analysis beforehand is more important than performance during the effort, because careful analysis is going to influence all the elements of the strategy. So I'm going to share with you one tool for strategic analysis, and can we have a show of hands here of people who know what SWOT analysis is, or who have used SWOT analysis earlier? So SWOT analysis is one of the ways to analyze the situation where the group or human advocacy effort is in, and this is very similar to the previous quote of Sun Tzu: "Know your enemy and know yourself." Because SWOT analysis is talking about internal and external attributes. Internal attributes, this is know yourself. This is something that we need to analyze regarding our own group, our own effort. And external, this is the environment. These are not just the adversary, but also allies, potential supporters, everything that is outside. And so we can distinguish attributes as internal and as external. On the other hand, there are attributes or things that are helpful for achieving our objective, and that are harmful for achieving our objective. And in that sense, when we define 4 different attributes, strengths would be internal attributes that are helpful for the objective. So these are the things that we have in our own organization that are going to help us. This is like commitment of our organizers, or access to resources, or something like that. When we talk about internal attributes that are harmful, this is when we talk about weaknesses. And these weaknesses could be anything from low participation of our own organizers to lack of skills in particular technique or particular activity, lack of resources or something like that. So these are all internal attributes, both helpful and harmful. And when we talk about external, then we talk about opportunities, which are external attributes that are helpful. This is a potential ally, an organization that would like to work with us, or there is a new technology that we can utilize for our own effort that is an opportunity for us, or an event that is going to take place and that can be used for our effort. And again, there are threats which are external attributes that are harmful for the group. This is a potential, I don't know, threat of persecution or repression, or there is some sort of something that is outside of our control. It's external but can harm the cause. And as somebody said here, it is very interesting quote, I will read it. It is said that the Japanese spend 80% on planning and 20% on doing. So if it is true, then planning is an important part of the Japanese culture. I don't know if that is true, but it is interesting for sure. So let's go back to the SWOT analysis. If we look at the strengths, weaknesses, opportunities and threats, the first letters of this are S, W, O and T, and this is how SWOT analysis got its name. So when we analyze a movement, a group, a human rights advocacy effort, whatever, we are looking at strengths, which is S in SWOT analysis. We're looking at the weaknesses of the group, and these two are the internal attributes. And we're looking also at opportunities and also at threats to the group. So this is what we are talking when we're talking about analysis, talking about knowing yourself, knowing your enemy, knowing the terrain, knowing the circumstances before going into strategic planning. So we're not going to do a SWOT analysis in this course. I just wanted to mention it as an interesting tool, but I'm sure you're gonna encounter it if you haven't already. You're gonna encounter this tool, and I encourage you to learn about it. There you can find it on the internet. You can find sources, and I will provide some as well, because it can be really a useful tool for strategic planning, for this step, analyzing the situation before proceeding to the plan. Are there any questions so far before we go to the next slide? No questions? Okay. One thing that should be said about strategy, and that is that strategy, yes, and somebody said this is a little bit confusing. Yes, we're gonna go we're gonna repeat the same thing through an example in just a bit. But before we do that, I would like to just say a few things about the role of strategy, because it is not as in the army or in a big corporation where you can have a committee of planners which are going to sit in a room, and they're going to spend I don't know how many weeks doing the planning, and they're going to come up with a plan, and then this plan is going to be approved, and it's going to be implemented, and this is going to come out just nice. In the case of human rights advocacy efforts, in case of human rights movements, you don't have a planning committee. You don't have enough time to sit down and to come up with a plan. So strategy is a bit of a process that is taking place during the struggle. It's not something that is taking place before the struggle begins. And this is very important. Strategy is a science, and it's an art, and it is developed over time. It is not a formula that can be used for a particular purpose just by applying a plan. But strategy can help a movement overcome adverse conditions. This is important. This is the role of the strategy. And so what we're going to do now is we're going to look at the strategic level and the questions that the strategy needs to answer. The first thing that the strategy needs to answer is the goals. What are the goals that we want to achieve? The second is, what are the methods? how are we going to achieve these goals? And the third is structure. What do we need to achieve this? What are the things that we need to establish? So to go back to my example of Otpor, the goal was to remove Milosevic, and the method was to organize around elections and civil disobedience, which would be a non-violent method, and the structure was a broad-based movement that needed to be created. But we're gonna show another example in just a minute. So far, these are the questions that need to be answered on the strategic level. What are the goals? What are the methods? And what is the structure? And on a campaign level or operational level, we have an objective, specific objective, as we said earlier, and this is similar to the goal. What do we want to achieve? Another thing is what is our message? This is another an important element on the operational level or campaign level. And what are the tactics that we're going to use? So this is another question that we need to answer on the operational level. What are the tactics that specific tactics that we're going to use? And another question on the operational level is concerning organization and resources. How are we going to do it? How do we do this? These tactics, and how do we reach this objective? What kind of organization and what kind of resources do we need for this? So as you can see, comparing to the strategic level, there is more detail here in terms of exactly what we're going to do, meaning what kind of tactics, what is the message we're going to convey, and what kind of organization we need. So this is the operational level. And we're going to focus on the operational level now by looking at Gandhi's Salt March. Gandhi's Salt March is featured on Tavana's library, and I encourage you to read it if you haven't so far. It is an important, how shall I say, episode in the Indian struggle for independence, where Gandhi actually decided to violate a salt tax act, which actually gave the British monopoly on trading salt. So making your own salt in India under the British rule was illegal. And so Gandhi wanted to challenge this, and we will see how this happened, because we're going to analyze this campaign. But this was part of a bigger strategy for Indian independence. So Gandhi's Salt March as a campaign was part of a bigger strategy. This is important to know, because he and the others in the Congress Party wanted to see India as independent from Great Britain, and in order to get closer to this goal, one of the things they did was the Salt March. Here we can see the picture of, here's a photo of Gandhi on the Indian coast, where they're actually taking the salt out of the ocean, which was an illegal thing to do. So what was the objective of the Salt March? If we look at the four things that we described earlier in the campaign: the objective, the message, tactics, and organization and resources. In the case of Salt March, the objective was to violate the Salt Act, which was introduced in 1882, and to violate it by making your own salt, which is a criminal offense. So this was the objective. The objective was also to dramatize the Declaration of Independence in a way that was meaningful for ordinary Indians. So the Declaration of Independence was the strategy. And they wanted to dramatize this strategy to show to ordinary Indians what independence is for them in everyday life. And they wanted to show this really crazy and absurd law that it is illegal to make your own salt by actually dramatizing the problem of the British rule of India. And what they also wanted to do was to build unity between Hindus and Muslims, but by fighting something that affects both communities. And this was solved. So this was the very clear objective of the campaign, which fits into the larger strategy of fighting for independence of India. So this is what Gandhi said in his letter to Viceroy Lord Irvine on March 2nd, 1930. He actually encapsulates the objective of the campaign pretty well in this letter, where he says, "On the 11th day of this month, I shall proceed with such core workers as the ashram as I can take to disregard the provisions of the salt laws. I regard this tax to be the most iniquitous to all from the poor man's standpoint, as the independence movement is essentially for the poorest in the land. The beginning will be made with this evil." So here you can see all the elements that we described in the previous slide. They're all here. They connect the campaign to the larger independence movement. They connect the campaign to the every poor man in India, and it gives a very clear explanation what Gandhi is going to do. And what is interesting is that he sends this letter to Viceroy. He actually sends this letter to his adversary. So this is not a secret plan. This is a very transparent campaign plan. Actually, he even informs his adversary about it. So this is the objective. What is the message of the campaign, which is the second thing? The message of this campaign is so simple, and it is the message of the whole, let's say, struggle for independence. And Gandhi, who repeated this message quite often, said, "The British are ruling this country for their own benefit. So why should we help them? Why should we help them?" This is what he asks. It's so simple. What his message here. He actually says that it's because people are obeying these crazy laws like the Salt Act. This is how the British are ruling the country. So in order to prevent this, or actually to end this rule, we shouldn't be helping the British anymore. This is what Gandhi says. So he goes on the march for some 400 kilometers to the sea. And then, as you can see on the picture on the right, he goes, grabs some of the seawater and makes some salt. Very simple move, but this actually was the tipping point of this campaign. What were the tactics in the Salt March? There are many tactics that they were using during this campaign. First, the campaign started by Gandhi walking on foot for some 400 kilometers down to the sea, and he made his salt first, and then this actually helped mobilize the people. They joined the march. They came down to the coast, but then they were doing other things as part of the campaign. They were picketing liquor stores. They were doing social boycotts of loyalists to the British rule. They were marching to salt depots where the salt was deposited and doing different salt raids. And they were finally boycotting British cloth because Britain also had a monopoly on textile, and they were actually selling textile to the Indians. So these were the different tactics as part of this campaign. Let's talk a little bit about the organization of the campaign. Organization of the campaign had several elements. First, it was the march to the coast that I described earlier. So it wasn't that Gandhi just showed up on one day and made salt in Dundee. He actually traveled for I don't know how many days, traveled down to the coast and And by doing that, he actually was raising momentum and increasing participation, mobilization of the people. And so finally, when he got there, it was the most important thing in India to be covered, to be followed, to participate in. He also, or not just him, but the whole leadership of this campaign, they also planned and organized the replacement of leaders after they are arrested. So this was organized beforehand. And they also organized the students to withdraw from government schools, which was another form of pressure against the British. So this was organization. This was organization that was done before the campaign. I encourage you to read more about this, because this is an excellent example of a successful campaign. So we can see that on the tactical level, and this is a good example for that, Salt March is a good example for that. Tactics are more effective when they're sequenced together to reinforce each other and to maintain the initiative. So these tactics that were used in the Gandhi's campaign were actually sequenced, so that it wasn't just the salt march, it wasn't just making salt. There were other things that were done that were reinforcing each other. And also another important thing on tactical level, and we're going to focus on tactical level more later in 2 weeks, and this is that the same tactic may be done at a new location or new timing with new participants in a new way, but it's actually much easier to use an entirely new tactic as a part of the same campaign. One of the biggest problems of campaigns is when a campaign has only one tactic that is repeated over and over again, and that tactic is usually public demonstrations, street demonstration, and there are a lot of movements and groups that would repeat the same tactic over and over again without tactical innovation. So yes, it is okay to use the same tactic, but in new circumstances. But it is for one particular campaign, tactical innovation is important. And Gandhi's Salt March actually shows this tactical innovation with a number of tactics that was used. I would like to now look at the objectives and the goals through the SMART criteria. What is SMART criteria? The SMART criteria is something that was let's say first mentioned by George Doran in Management Review in 1981, and this is actually using different letters for the word SMART, S-M-A-R-T, to describe goals of strategy and campaign objectives. So there is no clear consensus what these 5 words actually mean. People are using different words, but here is what I use, and so we're going to use my definition in the exercise that we're going to do. What are SMART goals? SMART goals, S stands for specific, meaning that these goals are specific. They mean something very concrete. They are not vague. They are not difficult to grasp. They are very specific and concrete. M stands for measurable, which means that this is something that can be measured. This is not something that is vague and that you cannot know if you succeeded or not. So you can actually evaluate and see if this is measurable, if this can be done. And once it is done, you can see that it has been done. A stands for attainable or achievable, which means realistic. This means that goal needs to be something that can be achieved, not something that is so big and so impossible to achieve. Relevant, R stands for relevant, and that means that a goal needs to fit in the larger plan. It has to be relevant. If we talk about the strategic goal, it has to be relevant to your mission and to your vision. If we talk about the campaign objective, it needs to be relevant in the larger strategy. And if we talk about tactical level, it needs to be it needs to be relevant to the campaign. The tactic cannot sit on its own. It needs to be part of something bigger. So in that sense, relevant means that it is part of something bigger. It has relevance to that. And T stands for timely. And T means timely means that it is something that will end at one point. And it is clear that it will end either on a particular day or when something specific and achievable and relevant is achieved. So that there is a point in time where we know this is going to this campaign, this tactic, this strategy is going to end. So let me repeat this once again. SMART criteria stands for objectives or goals that are specific, measurable, attainable or achievable, relevant, and timely. Is there any question? Is there anything that is not clear? Because we're going to now do a short exercise, and I would like to see if there is anything unclear about this SMART criteria before we go into the exercise. So let me read the letter once again. On the 11th day of this month, I shall proceed with such co-workers of the ashram as I can take to disregard the provisions of the salt laws. I regard this tax to be the most iniquitous of all from the poor man's standpoint. As the independence movement is essentially for the poorest in the land, the beginning will be made with this evil. Okay, where do you see you can actually use you can use the pen here, or you can use the chat box to point to the part of this letter where the objective, Gandhi's objective, shows that this objective is specific. That the objective of the campaign is specific. Do you have an idea? Salt laws. Okay, so we have somebody saying that this is where the objective is specific. Disregard the salt laws. Exactly. Disregard the salt laws. So this is an objective that is specific, because it really says what Gandhi is going to do. He's going to disregard the provisions of the salt laws. Okay, what makes it measurable? What makes this objective measurable? How this can be measured? Why is this objective measurable? How can you measure that the objective is being met? It's measured with the implementation of the tax. So you can actually see that the campaign is achieving its goal by measuring the tax collection. If the British are getting less money from the salt tax, this actually means that there is no money coming in from salt. Exactly. So this is how you can measure it. How can you see that this goal is achievable? Which is the next A, attainable, achievable. Exactly. He's going to do it with his co-workers. And another thing where he says, from the poor man's standpoint, which means that he is going to depend on the participation of the people who are affected by this act. So it's going to be an effort of the organization, but not just the organization. Other people, especially poor people, are going to join this particular campaign. And so how is this relevant? Why is this relevant in the larger strategy? Which part of this letter describes the relevance for larger strategy? Okay, so because we're in a hurry, I'm gonna rush it through. It's independence movement, exactly. So the independence movement is essentially for the poorest in the land, and the beginning will be made with this evil. So this is what he says. He says our fight for independence is going to start with eliminating the salt tax. So this is why salt tax is relevant for larger independence struggle. So he says that too in this letter. And finally, timely, this one is easy. It actually says that he's going to do it on the 11th day of this month. So you can see that, I hope this example helped. You can see that in this example, you can actually have all the elements of all the SMART criteria: specific, measurable, achievable, realistic, and timely for a campaign objective. And this is important both to communicate with the supporters and, in the case of Gandhi, to communicate with your opponents. And I'm going to go to my example that I used earlier and show it as another example. October 5th, the fall of Milosevic. The goal was of this campaign was very specific: to counter electoral fraud. And you can see that in the article that I wrote for Gozar, which is on the reading list. It was measurable because it required 1 million people to get to Belgrade. It was achievable because it relied on the 10-day build-up of road blockades and general strike and people who are using convoys to get to Belgrade. So we could get 1 million people into Belgrade. It was relevant because elections were the source of Milosevic's power, and countering electoral fraud would actually hit at the source of this power. It would prove that he didn't win fair and square. And timely, it was important to organize this before Milosevic organizes a round and the next round of elections, because if we go into the next round of elections, then he's going to take the lead. So we had 10 days to build up, but this needed to happen before the next runoff elections. So if you look at you will see that in the article, if you haven't read it already, that you can see actually that the goal of the campaign to counter electoral fraud was specific, measurable, achievable, relevant, and timely, similar to the Salt March. So if there is an urgent question, we can take it now, but we are going to continue the discussion and conversation on the forum. So any questions that are not burning, I will gladly take them on the forum. Is there any question at the moment? Let's go to the assignment. And the assignment is connected to the previous assignment. And so what I'm going to do now is individually walk you through the essay that you posted on the forum in the next 24 hours and help you use the SMART goal format that we just used in the class to come up with the goal of the human rights advocacy effort that is connected to the issue that you chose in this assignment, the previous assignment that you did. So you're going to do a SMART goal format: specific, measurable, achievable, realistic, and timely. It's going to be less than 150 words, so it's going to be very short. But don't worry about the details of this for now, because I'm going to walk each of you individually through the assignment that you already wrote and that you are going to use to make these goals. So we will continue this on the conversation on the forum. Thank you very much.
بهره برداری امن از موبایل و اینترنت، زن، حقوق فردی و اجتماعی، سازوکارهای جلوگیری از نقض حقوق بشر، پویشی در مفهوم دموکراسی، مروری بر پایگیری نهادهای مدنی در ایران، اندیشه‌های نوین از حقوق کارگران، آموزش خبرنگاری، حقوق شهروندی امروز و محیط زیست. توانا، رایگان توانایی ما را به سمت انسان امروزین جهانی متمدن تازه می کند. برای شرکت در این کلاس ها به توانا.org بروید و با جیمیل مستعار ثبت نام کنید. از طریق فیسبوک، توییتر و شبکه یوتیوب می توانید آموزشکده توانا را دنبال کنید. توانا آموزشکده است برای جامعه مدنی ایران.